So, have you heard about the mineral mining in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the arms conflict, child labor, and humanitarian abuse? Well, this video isn't exactly talking about that. Rather, let me tell you about the story behind it, how it began, and why we have gotten here. Think back to an era, decades and decades ago, known as the pre-colonial Rwanda. Yes, Rwanda. Meaning that this story will not begin in the DRC. It will, in fact, start from Rwanda and its pre-colonial time. That is, before the coming of the Belgian colonial masters. In this era, Rwanda's two major ethnic groups, the Hutu tribe and the Tutsi tribe, lived under a social class, one in which the Tutsi were seen as superior to the Hutus. Then the colonial masters came and further reinforced the tribal segregation. During the colonial era, the white men favored the Tutsi, giving them leadership positions over the Hutus. At some point, the Hutus became fed up, tired, done and dusted with being inferior. So they revolted against the colonial rulers and against the Tutsis. They won. Colonial rule came to an end. Rwanda experienced the dawn of a new leadership, one in which the Hutu were now in charge, were now in power. So what happened to the Tutsi? Well, many of them fled. Fearing for their lives, their safety, they fled to neighboring countries. One of those countries is today called the Democratic Republic of Congo and simply abbreviated as the DRC. Some time goes by and the Tutsi exiles in the DRC became tired of being exiles. They wanted to return back to their home country, Rwanda. However, this was not an easy dream, as they were not very liked by the Hutu-led government in Rwanda. So they formed a group that would negotiate with the new Rwandan government and lead their safe return back to Rwanda. This group was called the Rwanda Patriotic Front, simply put, the RPF. The RPF succeeded when they signed a peace agreement with the then president of Rwanda, President Habyarimana, a Hutu tribesman. This agreement ushered the safety net for the return of the Tutsi exiles back to their home, back to Rwanda. However, the anti-Tutsi sentiments in Rwanda did not completely quieten down. The Hutu-dominated media continued to foster those sentiments. Everything came crashing down on April 6, 1994, when President Habyarimana was assassinated. His plane shot to dust. Infuriated, the Hutu immediately pointed fingers at the Tutsi, blaming them for the murder of the president. This quickly snowballed into a full-blown genocide. In only 100 days, Hutu, backed by the Rwandan government, hunted and killed Tutsis. The Tutsis fought back fiercely. About 1 million people died, millions displaced, and thousands raped. This genocide, known as the Rwandan genocide, came to an end in July 1994 when the RPF, the Tutsi militia group, defeated the Hutus. With this defeat, a new government came into power. This time around, again, a Tutsi-led government. Many Hutu, now fearing for their lives, fled Rwanda and settled in the DRC. As though the trails of chaos were dragging along, the anti-tribal sentiment was not left behind. It crossed the borders as well, from Rwanda into the DRC. So at the refugee camps in the DRC, Hutu refugees began forming militia groups targeting Tutsis living in the DRC. The Tutsi residents in turn formed their own militia group, and a conflict was born within the DRC territories. This conflict soon blew up and unleashed a full-blown war, a war so brutal that it has been described as the bloodiest war since the Second World War. This war, known as the First Congo War, lasted from 1996 to 1997, during which Rwanda invaded the DRC. But for what cause? Rwanda asserted that it was to protect the Tutsis who were living in the DRC against the Hutus. However, after the First Congo War and since then, numerous armed groups have emerged in the DRC. Most of these armed groups are based on ethnic divisions that trace back to the event of the First Congo War. And one of these armed groups is called the M23 Rebel Group. The M23 is composed largely of ethnic Tutsis. They often clash with the DRC government and justify their operation on the basis of the protection of the Tutsis who live in the DRC. Notably, the Congolese government has often accused Rwanda of supporting the M23. However, Rwanda has always denied those accusations. Now you know the history and the emergence of armed conflict in the DRC. But how does this relate with the mineral mining and the humanitarian abuses that are now prevalent in the DRC? Well, I'll continue with that story in the next video.